Before we jump into the episode, do you ever get so wrapped up in your business you forget it's time to get someone special a gift? Not the same boring flowers or cookie cutter bauble. No, you want something unique, one of a kind. Guys, I got you. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code if you're watching on TV and go to the Glass Arts Collective. They have dozens of handmade, one-of-a-kind items in lots of categories. You'll find animals, jewelry, holiday gifts, and lots more. All a one-of-one and ready to ship anywhere in the US. Head over there to find that special gift for your special someone, and thank you, Glass Arts Collective, for sponsoring GYET. This is Get Your Entrepreneurship Together, where you'll find stories, tips, and value from successful entrepreneurs who are out there crushing it. Here's a short preview of this week's episode. So, speaking of what Apollo does, you're a consultancy, you're a product innovation and development company, but you're also a venture studio. Now, what in the heck is a venture studio?
We wrote this down somewhere, but basically it is literally etched into my memory. The idea at the time was technology has created expectations in consumers that brands cannot possibly live up to.
And welcome back to the show, everyone. My name is Brian Elam. I will be your host here on Get Your Entrepreneurship Together. And today we are going to talk about products. We're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about what it takes to understand when it's time to branch out to a new product or new service, and how you as the entrepreneur can have a better understanding of what that looks like. And is this thing going to actually work? And to help you understand that, we have Danny Nathan here today, the founder of Apollo 21, a consultancy firm extraordinaire that helps businesses do exactly what I just said. So, Danny, thank you so much for being here today, man. I'm excited to have you and for this conversation.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Okay. I always like to start at the beginning with my entrepreneur guests. That way the audience really has an understanding of who you are, where you came from. And then once we have that foundation, we'll obviously build into all of the good stuff from there. That being said, where did you grow up, sir? And what was your childhood like?
Oh, man. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, which is kind of a boring suburban whatever. It's a big city, but, very suburbs oriented and all of that fun stuff. And most of my time growing up was split between either the theater or the outdoors. So I spent a lot of time rock climbing and backpacking and mountaineering and all that fun stuff. Not always in Texas, which is not exactly known for its mountains.
Right.
And then throughout school, theater was sort of the first and foremost focus for me.
Really? So you're an actor then?
It's been a little while since I have, jumped into that head first. But yes, I was an actor for many years, and all the way through college, I actually have a degree in acting. So.
Oh, very cool. I did my senior year of high school. I got roped into doing a production of Scrooge. And I also was told, because I read the part better than anybody else, that I was going to be the main character. I'm like, oh, great. Here we go. And so, ended up getting bit by the theater bug too, and did community theater after high school and all of that. So very cool. We have that going on.
Yeah.
So what was mom and dad doing? Were either one of them in the entrepreneurship realm, or how did that look?
No, not at all. My dad was a doctor, and my mom was a mom. And she was always interested in architecture and design and things of that sort. And so that kind of rubbed off on me far more than, dad's knack for medicine ever did. But neither were particularly entrepreneurial. My dad was a terrible business person and made some decisions along the way that my mom yelled at him for because, they just were a little random and up in the air. And so the entrepreneurial bug really bit me kind of late in life. I went to undergrad and studied acting, went to grad school and studied advertising, moved to New York and started working in advertising, very quickly realized that I hated every second of it, and sort of took it upon myself to find a different career track, and ended up working at an innovation consultancy here in New York, which was my first foray into the worlds of technology and startups and entrepreneurship and all of that. And so it wasn't really until that point, kind of a couple of jobs into my career, that it really opened my eyes and became a core focus for the rest of my career.
Mm. And now, in making a decision about what's the right move for an entrepreneur, obviously you've got to understand what it is you want, but it's just as important to understand what it is that you don't want and why. So I'm curious, you spent all this time going through and getting an education in advertising. You went to New York to pursue that career. How did you come to determine that, this wasn't the right fit for you? Like, what was the disconnect? What was missing? Kind of take us into that a little bit.
Yeah, happy to. There was a lot of disconnect. So I graduated from ad school in 2004, and so if you kind of cast your mind back to what was happening in the technology landscape at that point, we were sort of right at the bitter edge of the beginning of social media. The iPhone came out just a couple of years later and really changed all things in terms of, accessibility to the internet and how people use the internet on a daily basis. And my biggest frustration is I was probably the last class out of ad school that just kind of ignored technology. We were focused on TV spots and print ads and billboards and all of the old school media. And when I came to New York, I sort of had my eyes open to what else was possible. I started writing for a blog that was focused on advertising, and really just started kind of tapping into what was happening in the technology space. And to make a long story short, I got very frustrated spending every day creating ads that effectively interrupted people's lives at inopportune times to sell them things that they probably didn't want. And all of that without any kind of consideration for the changes that were happening around the world and the way that technology was changing the relationship between brands and consumers, and the way that consumers had the opportunity to reach the brands that they were interested in, or often ignore the brands that they were not interested in. And all of it just sort of got under my skin to a point where I got really frustrated, and I wasn't finding the work terribly challenging at the time either. And so spent a lot of time sitting around an office feeling like I was doing nothing. I went to the folks that I was working for and asked them for, a copy of Flash on my computer at the time, because I wanted to learn that, since it was new and interesting and all of that, which feels weird to say today. But yes, at one point, Flash was actually new and cool.
Oh, right. I remember.
Yeah. And, and they said no. And I was dumbfounded. Like, I couldn't understand why a company that had an employee that was itching to learn something new that would contribute more to what they were able to offer to their clients would ever in a million years say no over something as stupid as the cost of a Flash license. And it just kind of set the tone for how I viewed my work, both at that company and in advertising in general. And it all kind of came to a head in one meeting that I don't have to get into, but I just sort of mentally checked out of advertising. And I hit a point in my career where I debated going back for another master's degree in something that I found more interesting. I debated moving to South America for a while to find myself and climb mountains. And I also was interviewing at every single place in New York that I could find that was not an ad agency. And that hunt was ultimately what led me to my role at the innovation consultancy and really kind of changed my entire career path.
Perfect. Well, thank you for giving us a little bit of insight into that decision-making
pleasure.
process. And as soon as you said 2004, I was like, okay, I know exactly what happened. We were stuck against that old trope of, well, this is how it's done.
Yes,
Versus
very much so.
adopting the newer technologies. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And the amount of change that was happening in the space at that time was, in many ways unprecedented. I mean, obviously the changes that we're going through today are equally meaningful, but at the time there was so much happening that was changing the way that people utilize technology and related to one another and the world around them, that it was such a fascinating time to be involved.
I get goosebumps right now just thinking about it. I still remember vividly when I first saw the first gen iPhone. Me and a guy that I had moved to Phoenix with to join a band, we were sitting down. We were sitting down at a table after he had helped me move into my apartment because he was like, after all that stress, like, you want a beer? I'm like, yes, I
Yeah.
definitely want a beer. And he
Yeah.
showed me this new iPhone, and I'm sitting there watching YouTube on a
Hmm.
freaking phone, and mind
Yeah.
blown.
Yeah. All of a sudden we're living Star Trek or Star Wars or
Yeah.
whatever your favorite sci-fi is. But yes, it was that moment of, oh my God, this is happening.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And you're right. Touchscreen video on a freaking phone that was actually
Yeah.
worth a darn.
Yeah.
It's just incredible times. And yes,
Well,
start.
and the big player heading into that was the Motorola Razr at the time. That was
Oh
the
yeah,
phone prior to the iPhone that everybody wanted,
everybody
which of
wanted it.
course was your old flip phone with, it had a camera in it, which was super cool at the time. And of course the camera was awful, but that's what was cool. And so the iPhone coming out at the time when the Motorola Razr was the cutting edge was just mind blowing.
Oh, 100%. I had a Motorola. It wasn't a Razor, but it was a decent one, and it had the ability to get video and the internet on it. But
Yeah.
boy,
The internet
those
was hard to use back
it
then.
was tough, man. You think dial up was bad? Try wanting to watch a video on your phone and being cool and have it just bip out on you all the time.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, this has been a fun trip down memory lane. Thank you for indulging me with that one. And
My pleasure.
I just want to add the caveat that Star Trek: The Next Generation was the greatest series of my lifetime growing up. So, yes, good times, good times. Um, so take us into, okay, so you figured out advertising isn't your jam. You're coming up against the inability to adopt new technology, and you're like, I want out of here. Anything but this.
Yeah.
What led you to have those clues or that intuition that, hey, maybe this particular consultancy is the fit? What was that interview process like? What made you think that, yeah, I could do this?
It was less about, so the place that I ended up working was called Poke, like Poke.
Okay.
Um, and it was less about, for as much as I loved Poke and I ended up spending 5 years there, it was less about ending up there when I initially reached out as it was, as I said, I was interviewing anywhere that was not an ad agency and asking for introductions and so on and so forth. And Poke at the time was new. They opened, so this would have been October, November 2007, and they'd only been open for about 2 months. And I have to admit, I don't even remember where I first came across them or why I heard about them, but I remember emailing somebody that worked at Poke. It was the only email address that I could find, and it was one of the creative directors at Poke at the time. And I emailed her. Her name was Janine. I ended up working with her pretty closely after that. Just trying to get a leg in the door. And she wrote me back kindly and said, well, the person that you need to talk to is a guy named Tom, and here's his email address. And I sat down and crafted an email to Tom that basically said, hi, I'm Danny. I'm hungry as hell. I want to get out there and do really cool stuff. I've been working in advertising and I'm bored stiff doing it. Here's why. Here's the way that I see the world. You guys seem to think this way. You know, is there any possibility that, there's a fit here? And Tom turned out to be an incredible mentor for me and responded almost immediately and basically said, sure, we have a team-wide happy hour on Thursday. Come here. And I walked into the office not knowing anybody. And, one of the early things that the folks at Poke were doing was every Thursday evening at 5 o'clock, work would stop. We would all sit down together in the office and have what we called catch up, which was, an hour of what's going on, what are the status of projects, but also what's going on in your life, what's the coolest thing that you saw this week, whatever. And then everybody would go out for happy hour. And it was sort of immediate. I had this moment of, oh my God, I found my tribe.
Mm.
This was a group of people that were excited about what was going on in the world, that were talking about the things that I was interested in. And I ended up having a great experience and a great evening with them. And it just sort of unfolded into first some freelance work and then eventually getting hired and so on and so forth. And part of what made my experience at Poke so groundbreaking for me was Tom, who was one of the three founders and kind of the head of all things creative and strategic and technology driven at Poke, and I happened to see eye to eye very closely on just about everything, to be frank, our outlook of the world. And it was an interesting place. It was a really hard place to work. I mean, we were busy and everybody was scrambling all of the time. And to be frank, Tom was one of those people that you either got along with or you didn't. And for better or worse, I did very well, and it led to a ton of opportunity, and we just sort of bounced ideas off of one another in a way that fueled the fire, I think, for both of us, certainly for me, and led to a 5-year stint helping to lead projects and shape the way that the company grew up. And I learned more than I could even begin to quantify in a few sentences over those 5 years. And I did so while working for brands that I probably would not have had the opportunity to get my hands on otherwise for quite a long time in my career. So we were developing new products for American Express. We were handling global product launches for Dyson. We were building installations that went in the MoMA. We were doing work for General Mills. I mean, it was such an opportunity. And for as much as I loved the work, I also loved the way that Tom and the team there kind of approached clients. And so, to give you a perfect example, and then I'll stop rambling, we got an RFP from Fujifilm that, to make a long story short, asked us to build a photo sharing website for them. They had a budget of an insane amount. It was like $1 million or something to build a photo sharing website for Fuji users. And this was in the heyday of Flickr, when, everybody was sharing photos to Flickr and so on and so forth. And, whereas most agency or creative service shop owners would have looked at that and said, oh my God, this is $1 million opportunity. We need to do everything we possibly can to capture it. The guys at Poke kind of looked at it and said, you know what? The world doesn't need another photo sharing website. That's not the point. And our response to the RFP was written up and put on a website, and the URL of that website was www.thelastthingthe world needs is another photo sharing website.com. And we shot a whole stack of about 200 photos of the team around the office during the day, just us, like the day-to-day life at Poke. And we scribbled that URL on the back of every single photo, and we dropped it in the mail to Fuji. That was our response to the RFP. And we lost the RFP, which was not the point of the story, but more was the willingness of a team to respond to $1 million opportunity that they didn't believe in that manner was just insane to me. And insane in the best possible way. I mean, it was like the fact that they were willing to say, no, we think you should do this. And if you want to do this, we're happy to help. But if what you want is a photo sharing website, go find somebody else. We don't want it.
Wow. That amazing. Oh my goodness. There's just too much to unpack there. When we're thinking about, you and the relationship that you had with Tom and how that came about and developed, what was it about his, if you could give us just one, for the sake of time, what was one thing that you and he saw eye to eye on about where this whole thing was going that just made it so electric, to have that relationship between you two and foster your growth?
I'll give you a couple of quick examples. One, Tom was willing to explore anything. And I was young and relatively inexperienced in technology, but I was super excited about coming up with ideas and thinking about new ways for people in the world and brands to all interact with one another. And whereas a lot of folks would have looked at me and said, no, you're dumb, we can't do that, you don't know what you're talking about, Tom gave me enough rope to hang myself and really just sort of said to me, I don't know, go figure it out, go explore it. And a couple of years into my stint at Poke, the writer's strike happened in the TV space. And at the time we were doing work with True TV, which was the newest iteration of Court TV.
I remember them. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were putting forward just these weird ideas. One of which was like, their whole thing was all of the shows on True TV are true. They're real people out in the world doing real things, etc. And so we had this idea for like building a browser extension that would create a meta layer over all of the websites that you were exploring and allow you to go and leave notes. And like, if you were in the know and had the extension and could turn it on, you could see and communicate with other people about the content on any web page. It was just this really weird idea that had crept in. And again, like most people would have looked at me and said, I don't even understand. You're an idiot. And Tom looked at me and said, great, go draw it up. We're going to present it to the client tomorrow. And we did. And it was great. That's one example. The other one that, interestingly, I still use, Tom and I were working on some project late one night, and we were always sort of the misfit toys. We were the folks that people would come to when they needed a really weird off the wall idea or opinion or perspective on what was happening in the world. And we needed some way to ground our approach and our thinking that people could understand. And we we wrote this down somewhere, but basically it is literally etched into my memory. The idea at the time was technology has created expectations in consumers that brands cannot possibly live up to. And that guided so much of our work, but more importantly, as I said, it is literally etched in my brain. And I literally wrote that down on a project that I'm working on like earlier this week. I mean, it is still every bit as relevant today as it was 15 years ago when we scribbled it down. And the fact that I was working with somebody with whom, we could come up with a statement like that still resonates, I think is probably one of the best examples for the way that Tom and I saw eye to eye.
Well, I'm definitely glad that you threw that second example in, because I do think it's hyper relevant,
Yeah.
especially today with the advancements that we're seeing, versus, the iPhone and everything back in 2007. Well, we're
Right.
riding another amazing wave right now. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And, going back just a little bit further into what you were saying, I wanted to touch on the whole happy hour concept that was going on there, because one of the things that is so important to not only have a business that works and works well is to have a culture within that
Yes.
business that fosters not only checking in business wise, like you were saying, but also, hey, what's going on with your life? Those
Yeah.
I literally was on and filming a podcast yesterday with someone that brought up how just important, super important it is to build a culture like that. So again,
Yes.
guys, reiterated by another successful entrepreneur, if you're not building culture, you're not doing business the right way. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to make that point there. All right, so we've come to the point where you've been at this company, you've been at Poke for 5 years, right? That
Mhm.
was your stint. Okay. And it comes time, another opportunity presents itself. Take us into that opportunity to branch out onto your own, and what made you think that, again, hey, this is the right timing for me?
Ironically, it wasn't an opportunity that presented itself so much as it was the sense that it was time for me to explore something different. And one of the biggest things that I took away from my time at Poke, in addition to a far greater understanding of the technology space, was the entrepreneurial bug.
Mm.
And at the tail end of my tenure at Poke, we had a friend and I who also worked there had created a little side project, and I sort of got bitten by the bug, and so I left Poke to start my first company. Um, and that was something that I started with my girlfriend at the time. That was called Date Night Is, and the thesis behind Date Night Is was essentially online dating is becoming widely accepted. It is how many people now meet. But there was this interesting moment of, once online dating has been successful for you and you have cultivated a relationship out of it, there is nothing that exists in the world of technology to continue cultivating that relationship by leveraging technology. And so we built Date Night Is to encourage couples to continue dating one another, to help them remember important dates like anniversaries and birthdays, and to help populate interesting date ideas between the couples. And so we built a platform that was it was unique in that it was a dual account that created a single experience. And so my girlfriend and I both had an account, and that account would learn what each of us liked, and then it would come up with date suggestions that aligned to something that was interesting for both of us, as well as, the geographic opportunities. It wasn't trying to send you from, the financial district to the Upper West Side, if you're familiar with New York or whatever. It was, hey, if you're going to start with a drink here, you should go to dinner here and then go to a show here. And it was all kind of contained within the neighborhood. And then we also pulled in deals and things like that from, Groupon was big at the time, and there were a few other competitors. And so, it was sort of an all-in-one stop shop for maintaining your relationship.
That's super cool. Super
Yeah, it
cool.
failed miserably, but it was a ton of fun.
It's ironic that something like that would have failed like that, because I don't know, I guess maybe the people weren't ready for like all-in-one platform type solutions or something, or why do you think that it didn't catch on?
Mistakes. We made a ton of mistakes, and the reality is that no matter how good your idea is, building a company and building a successful business out of it is insanely difficult. And so, you can do everything right. And please understand, I'm not claiming by a long shot that we did everything right. But you can do everything right and still fail. And so there were a lot of problems along the way. And, we were an unfunded early stage startup, and we were both trying to make a few bucks here and there as well by freelancing and so on and so forth. So, it was just if nothing else, it was a great learning experience for us, and we had a ton of fun, and it was interesting. But it's an incredibly difficult space to play in, and I think that people had trouble wrapping their heads around a dating app that wasn't designed for meeting somebody to date, but rather was designed for the people that you've already met.
Okay. Yep. People like that new. They like that shiny object syndrome, and that could apply to a person too.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. Let's get into your expertise and what we're doing here at Apollo. And I wanted to ask you, given what you just went through with that app or platform, how can founders better understand when it is time to launch a new product or service, and to that end, have some sense if it's going to be successful?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. We are today, and I've learned a ton. Bear in mind, date night was also 12, 14 years ago, something like that. So there's been a fair bit of time in the meantime that I've had to learn and figure out what I've done wrong. Today, and you'll hear me and the Apollo 21 team harp on this quite a bit. We are huge fanatics for lean customer development and the idea that, customer first ideation is sort of where it's at. And so today we have a lot of frameworks that we utilize, whether that is lean customer development or, activities like a design sprint or something like that, that give us the opportunity to explore and de-risk early. And so we believe in it so much so, in fact, that we have launched an accelerator or pre-accelerator program called Launchpad that is designed explicitly to take early stage or idea stage founders through that process of rigorous validation and customer learning, so that by the time they go to build a product, they have talked to a ton of people, they understand exactly where the pain points are, they've had the opportunity to ideate and iterate their way to something that has at least a greater chance of discovering product market fit, and to limit and de-risk the amount of technology that they need to build in order to get the first version of that out into the world. And that really kind of follows the process and the mentality that we lean on to answer the question that you've asked, which is, how do you know when it's time to create a new product? Well, you find an opportunity in the market, your customers are asking for it, you find or discover or see that there is something that you are not fulfilling or not accomplishing for your customers, and you learn what that is, and then you can go out and build it for them, hopefully with the information that you need to do so successfully without that moment of building a product looking for a solution, as they say.
So it sounds to me like you've basically developed a multi-prong way to have what do they call those things? Where they have a bunch of customers sit around a table and give feedback.
Focus group.
A focus group. Yeah. You've developed a system to have a multi-pronged approach to a focus group. Am I understanding that correctly?
Kind of, yes. Focus group, generally think of a dozen people sitting around a table with a very dry moderator, and often, it's a one-way mirror room where somebody's sitting there watching the conversation. And the idea is similar in that, we are huge advocates for talking to your customers and understanding what they want, but not in a focus group setting.
Mm-hmm.
Focus groups are weird because people feel like they're in a fishbowl. They feel like they have to give the answer that somebody wants to hear, and really they can lead to a fair amount of bias if they're not conducted carefully. So when we talk about talking to customers, what we're talking about is literally talking to customers. So find the people that fit your target market, get on a one-on-one Zoom call with them, ideally something that is akin to face
Okay.
rather than just a phone call, and talk to them. But there's an art to understanding how to ask the right questions and how to ask questions that are not leading that person to give you the answers that support your idea, for example, but rather just sort of probing them to understand what their pain points are, what are the most difficult aspects of the things that they're doing day to day, so that you can uncover the opportunities for service or technology to play a role in solving those moments for that person. And part of the reason that we believe in it so heavily is that by the time you've done this 20, 50, 100 times around a specific idea, and you do it sort of in layers. The first layer is just discovery and finding where the pain points are. And then you begin to kind of go, oh, okay, I've talked to 20 people and 15 of them said that this was a problem for them. And so you kind of latch on to that moment and you keep exploring that. You talk to a few more people. Oh, is this a problem for you? And then ultimately what I find is that it begins to kind of cultivate an idea for a solution. And so then you kind of draw out that solution very lightly. I mean, we're not talking prototype, we're not talking building anything. We often use storyboards, like 3 or 4 frames, comic book style, that are, hey, we've heard that you have this problem. If we were to come up with a solution that looked, I don't know, a little bit something like this, would that solve that problem for you? And you want to keep it relatively loose, because ultimately what will happen is people will tell you what features they want from that if you don't show them those features to begin with. And so, you just kind of go, hey, I'll make it up. You have a problem that your dog is barking all day while you're not at home at work, and it's bugging the crap out of your neighbor, and your neighbor complains to you. And so maybe your idea is, oh, well, I need a dog walking service. Obviously not exactly new, but for the sake of an example, we show people a storyboard that says, hey, your dog is barking, your neighbor's complaining. What if somebody could come and walk your dog for you, and you could call them at the touch of a button? So, cool. Okay. It's a mobile app that allows me to call a dog walker. Great. Start showing that to people and see what they say. Oh, well, does it have a camera? Can I see my dog? I don't know. Do you want it to have a camera? Why? What would you learn from your dog? Do you want to talk to them? Do you want it to have a treat dispenser? Like those types of things where you go, oh, okay, maybe the answer isn't actually a dog walking service, but it's an app that allows you to talk to your dog and interact with it and play fetch. I don't know. I'm making all this up, but
No, that actually exists. I'm not sure if you're aware of it.
oh, I know it does.
Okay.
I know it does. For whatever reason, it's the thing that popped into my head to use as an example. So yes, it definitely exists. But my point is that, the way that you might go about discovering that the thing that people want is not a dog walking service, but a way to play catch remotely with their dog, is by talking to them. And so, the series of exercises that we go through is geared towards kind of getting ever closer and closer to that moment of truth where people go, yes, oh my God, can I have that tomorrow? And the benefit to that is when you get enough people going, oh my God, yes, can I have that tomorrow? That's when you start to go, oh, okay, we're onto something. We've got a notion of what product market fit is. But not only that, you've then got, 10, 15, 20 people that you've talked to who are all sitting there going, oh my God, can I have that tomorrow? Guess what? Those are your first customers. And so before you've ever built a thing, and there's kind of an adage in the world of startups that you want to sell before you build, but
Right.
it's one of the most difficult things to do. And so the reason that we like this process is that it almost builds that in, where you go, oh, okay, by the time we've talked to this many people, we've got 20, 30, 40 of them that are lined up saying, if you launch this tomorrow, I will buy it. And of course, there's a bunch more that goes into it. You charge their credit card in advance to confirm that they'll actually pay, blah, 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 blah. But the point is that if you've got people saying, yes, I want that and I'm willing to pay for it, you have a much stronger stance to then pursue the development of that product.
Yeah, 100%. Especially if you have the ability or the cojones, as they say, to charge somebody a little bit to have,
Yes.
put a bookmark in it.
Yep.
And yeah, I'll
Yeah.
pay for
Hey,
the
do you want to
rest
put a
later.
deposit down?
Yeah, exactly. That's
I mean, Kickstarter's built on that entirely, and
right.
been plenty
And
successful.
very successful, absolutely. And look at what Elon did with Tesla. Hey,
Hmm.
do you think this car is pretty awesome? You want one? Well, here, put $100 down, and we'll let
Yep.
you know in a few years when you can get it.
Yes, exactly.
It's just nuts, man. But thank you so much for going into such detail with that process, and so we can understand what it looks like and the importance of connecting with the customer, because it's so you're right, it's absolutely vital to understand if a product is going to be successful or not. And to that end, before we move on, I want to ask you, what kinds of outreach or what kinds of questions would a company ask? Let's say, well, just the one that pops to mind is Grunt Style. They're a t-shirt
You know.
company backed
Okay.
by veterans, made by veterans. It's a great company. I love their stuff.
What's the
Now,
name again?
they're called Grunt Style.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Look them up. They're a whole
I
lot of
will.
they're a whole lot of fun.
Nice.
And they make. I love their shirts. Uh, okay, so that aside, shout out Grunt Style. Obviously, this is not sponsored by them, by the way.
But it might be soon.
It should be. Who knows, man? That'd be incredible. What an honor. But anyhow, so you've got Grunt Style. They make t-shirts. And how do they, or any company that makes shirts, what have you, how do they reach out to their customer and start asking the questions? Do you have any problems with what we've done, with what we've built for you so far? How do you start that process? And what kinds of questions do you ask?
That process in my mind is grounded in data. And if it's, there's kind of two ways to look at this because it's slightly different if you're an existing company looking to expand your product line versus you're an idea stage founder who doesn't know whether or not there's a market for what you're doing. So
True.
the benefit of doing this as an established company is that you presumably have an established customer base. And so if I were the folks at Grunt Style, the first thing I would do is go and make a list of the people, the top 100 people who've spent the most money at Grunt Style, for example, because clearly you're doing something that they're interested in and they're your kind of super users, if you will.
Right.
And whoever at Grunt Style, whether it's the CEO or the head of marketing or whatever it is, shoot those people an email, not a mass email. Don't send out a big 100-person email list. Hey, you're part of a group of people or whatever. No. Hey, Brian, I'm Danny. I'm the founder of Grunt Style. You've spent, $1,000 on t-shirts at Grunt Style. Thank you so much. I would love to take 15 minutes to talk to you about what you like, or better yet, what you don't like, or what you wish you could get from Grunt Style. Well, guess what? Brian, if you spend $1,000 at Grunt Style, it sounds like you're probably a fan. If the CEO or the chief marketing officer or whatever reaches out and says, hey, I want to pick your brain, like, first of all, most of your super user customers are going to go, oh, cool. Yeah, let's do it.
Right.
Great. All right, email 100 people. You got, 30, 40, 50 conversations lined up right there. Cool. Hey, Brian, I'm Danny. I'm the founder. First of all, thank you so much for spending a bunch of money with us. Like, it's clear that you love our t-shirts. Would love to understand what you like about them so much. And also, what are we missing? Do you want long sleeve t-shirts? We only sell short sleeve today. Do you want them in a different material? What if we did button ups? Do you like graphic tees? Or, from there, the questions just kind of ask themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not about grilling somebody as much as it is just having a conversation and figuring out in the moment, based on what they're saying, what can you learn from them that will provide you as the business owner, the person that's running that business, value in that conversation to figure out where opportunities are.
Perfect. Love it, man. Such great insight, man. So, guys, if you had any doubt that Danny knows his stuff and is super knowledgeable and experienced in this industry, I think we've just kind of settled that in your mind.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
Amazing stuff. So, speaking of what Apollo does, you're a consultancy, you're a product innovation and development company, but you're also a venture studio.
Mhm.
Now, what in the heck is a venture studio? Because I've heard of venture capitalism and
Yes.
investing in a company, getting stock shares, all of this, but what's a venture studio?
So, in the most simple terms, Brian, a venture studio is a company that is designed to build new companies. So, it's a startup factory, for lack of better terms. So, what we are focused on in part is creating repeatable processes to find successful ways to discover and de-risk product market fit around new products and then create those new products. And so there's a lot of flavors of venture studios, and it is a relatively newish, although not the first venture studio I think opened in 1996, but it's been sort of an under the radar means of developing new products and new companies for quite some time that is beginning to come into its own over the last, call it, I don't know, 6, 12, 18 months. Um,
Oh,
and there's a couple of ways to look at a venture studio. Many, or even I might say most venture studios have a VC fund that is attached to them, whether that is through the studio itself or in partnership with an existing VC.
mm,
We are somewhat unique and, on the smaller end of that scale, in particular because we do not actually have a fund attached. And so, unlike a number of other venture studios where you might approach them, they would act as sort of your pre-seed funding, in startup parlance, and kind of help you pay to get your company off the ground, while also then contributing hands-on to the development of that product and that company. We function a little bit differently in that our venture efforts are supported entirely by our consulting efforts. And so effectively, we work on a either work for hire or a discount for equity type of position where we incubate ideas most of the time that come from within our own organization. So as an example, we have a product that we wholly own called Meeting Cost Calculator, which does exactly what it sounds like it does. That our team came up with, built, soup to nuts, and now launched and runs, that kind of fits our venture mindset, which, is largely focused on helping to build products that help companies achieve their work more in a more streamlined fashion. And so a lot of the work that we do is already focused on that area. Our consulting work is split largely between helping companies ideate and build new products, and also helping them build technology for use inside the house for streamlining operations, managing data, blah, 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 all that fun stuff. And so to bring it back to the point, our venture studio is a little bit different just in terms of the way that we're structured and the way that we pursue projects. But simply put, we have built out that process. And, you heard me kind of rattling off the beginnings of that process around lean customer development and so on and so forth that help us quickly get new products to market.
mm. And what are you looking for with a particular company or a group of founders that have an idea? What are you looking for in order to analyze what they've got going on and say, hey, you might be a good fit for this venture studio that we've got going?
To be quite frank, most of our venture studio work is primarily focused on internal projects. We do support some external entrepreneurs, but those usually kind of happen opportunistically, for lack of better terms. Somebody will come to us because they feel like they need help getting their product development in line, or they just sort of don't know what to do next. And for the folks that we believe strongly in, and for the folks that have ideas that we think really have legs, that's where we sort of invite them into the fold of the venture studio and offer to take on equity in exchange for a much cheaper build process and for access to our team and so on and so forth. And so generally at that point, we've already developed a relationship with that person. We have a sense of what that founder believes the opportunity is, and we have a sense of how they think about the approach to that opportunity. And it's interesting if you look at how VCs vet projects and opportunities and investments. Really what it comes down to is they usually accept about 1% of them, and they are always looking for opportunities to say no. And I think part of what makes us unique in that is that in a way we're looking for opportunities to say yes, because the default for us is that we are not investing, whereas the default for them is also we are not investing, but for very different reasons. They exist to invest, whereas we exist to help build and bring to life. And so if we're going to invest, be it time or capital, into something, we do so because we have very, very strong conviction in the potential of it.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. And I like the fact that you're looking for the opportunity to say yes versus the opportunity to say no. Does that come from your acting background? Yes, and?
I do take a lot from my acting background, but that one in particular is more from my business building background.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Oh man. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. We've gotten so much great value and insight from you, Danny, and I really thank you
Awesome.
for that. And what I'm really curious about now is, what is the vision for your life? When you're thinking about, running this business and doing all of the things in this business, there's always a personal element to it. What are you looking to get out of it or experience so you can look back at the end of your life and say, you know what? I did exactly what I wanted and got what I wanted out of this. What is that?
Um, I'll be really honest. Doing this in many ways is what I want. It's sort of the culmination of a lot of different aspects of my career, and the way that we function at Apollo 21 really gives me the opportunity to play in the areas that excite me most. And if push comes to shove and I have to divine one thing, for me, it's problem solving. What I love about the projects and the clients that we take on is no project or problem that we tackle is the same as a previous one. And so we get such a unique opportunity to learn a lot about a huge variety of industries and businesses and approaches and so on and so forth, that it just feels like it's new and exciting every time we do it. And that's what I find fun about it. And then of course there is the problem solving aspect of it, and it's almost like solving a puzzle. This person has this problem, it's driven by this business goal and this market dynamic. How do we sort of shake it up and put the pieces back together in a way that makes that successful, or changes their world, or makes their customers happier? And that to me is the fun part.
So you're not focused on a specific goal at Apollo. It's the mission, it's the journey that is ultimately the reward. Am
It
I
is in many
understanding that?
ways. I mean, look, I could sit here and rattle off that I would love to be financially successful and this, that, and the other. And sure, there's elements of that, but I work really hard on building Apollo because I'm hoping that it's the last job that I will ever have to have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And now we're going to take a very quick switch back and go a completely different direction. We're not going to talk entrepreneurship at all. We're just going to have a little bit of fun here right at the end, because I
Okay.
started with building the foundation of who you were as you started this life. So now we're going to go back into you a little bit and just figure out, what is your favorite vacation spot?
That I have two answers for that, and it depends on what kind of mood or what kind of vacation I'm looking for. If I need to unwind and unplug, then somewhere on a beach where somebody delivers a beer when you ask for it, that's great. If I need to get out and escape and accept a challenge, then whatever the closest mountain is that I can hike or climb to the top of is usually a pretty good place to find me.
Excellent. What's one of the most memorable climbs that you've made?
Oh man, um, I almost don't know how to answer that.
They're all so good.
They are, and even when they're bad, they're good. It's funny. One of the most memorable for me is climbing Mount Rainier, and we actually did not make it to the summit of Mount Rainier, but stopped probably, I don't know, 100 vertical feet shy, so probably half an hour or maybe an hour's hike from the top. And I was actually, at the time, I was one of four guides on a trip with a bunch of teenagers that were spending their summer out in the outdoors. And then of course we had hired Rainier Mountain guides as well, just because they had the expertise. So we'd been backpacking for weeks and so on and so forth. Anyway, I was at the tail end of a rope team at nearing the summit of Mount Rainier, and it was whiteout conditions, blowing like crazy. And I just remember looking up, and there was a guide at the far end of the rope, and there were two kids in between, and the wind would blow and the kids would go thunk, and they'd get back up, and we go a little further and the wind would blow and the kids would go thunk, and then they get back. And that sort of led to the decision to turn around shy of the summit, which was by all means the correct decision. But it was such a memorable experience and a great climb and all of that fun stuff. So that one stands out.
Yeah, I could definitely see why, and it's goes into your character. You were more concerned with the potential loss of life than getting to that top. So that's
Yes, loss of life is not an acceptable outcome for mountain climbing in my world.
no, yes, amen to that. And then I just wanted to ask one more kind of fun question. What's one item or experience on your bucket list that you have not crossed off yet?
Ooh. First one that comes to mind, I have not yet been to Iceland, which I realize is sort of now a done destination if you're, one of the cool people. But I've had a hankering for it for a long time, and just the landscape and everything looks so amazingly beautiful. So at some point, I still want to make it there.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I follow Peter McKinnon online because I'm a hobby photographer and
Hmm.
videographer, and he went to Iceland a few years ago, and just the videos
Yeah.
that came out of that were just amazing.
Yeah. Have you seen work from Chris Burkhardt?
Chris Burkhardt. I've heard.
Ooh,
Okay, I've heard the name, and I'm pretty sure him and Pete are connected. Like
I wouldn't be
they're
surprised if they're
buddies.
both interested in Iceland or whatever. I want to say Chris might have moved to Iceland now, but he spends a lot of time there, and some of his shots from that world are just utterly amazing.
Hmm. Very, very true. I love landscapes. That's what I really love to
Yeah.
photograph is landscapes because they always hold still and they never tell you that delete the photo. Like I don't like my smile or like my eyes were squinty in a weird way. We can
Yeah.
like landscapes don't talk back like that. Well, Danny, this has been, like I said, this has been an incredible conversation, packed with
Oh yeah,
value,
it's
and
been a pleasure.
I can't thank you enough. And so, where do people go to learn more about you, learn more about Apollo, and just get into your world?
Absolutely. Three really good places. The first one is our website, apollo21.io. A bunch of case studies, a bunch of articles, white papers, all that fun stuff that you're probably used to seeing on websites like that. The second one, and perhaps even more fun, is our relatively new newsletter, which is called Innovate, Disrupt, or Die. And you can find that at innovatedisruptordie.com. Please come check it out. And then if you're interested in the pre-accelerator program that I mentioned a little while ago, the URL for that is countdowninitiated.com. And so if you are an aspiring entrepreneur or somebody with an idea that just keeps, pestering you in the back of your head and you want to figure out how to bring it to life, go check that out and we can help you do it.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, guys. Well, those links are going to be down below for you to check out. So click, explore, get all the value, see if you are the right person, the right fit for Danny and Apollo 21, because obviously they know exactly what they're doing. And again, Danny, just thank you so much for this conversation, man. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, you know what to do. Like this show, share it with your network. You never know whose life you can positively impact with just a very simple and free share. So get it out there. Subscribe if you love this content. And peace. I'll see you in the next one.